Well, hello everybody. Thank you again for another rendition of Succurri's webinars. Um, you know, we we talk about a lot of different things. Lately, it seems to be a lot about AI, which is a little bit of our topic today. Also some security things, but today it's all about navigating the AI vendor landscape. So, Grant and Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we got to give them what they want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we watched everybody watching our YouTube videos out there, and it's like, oh, I think everybody wants to know more about AI. So that's good. That's what we're going to give them. So I'll just recap or kind of go over what we're going to go through. Obviously, there's a huge gold rush in AI and what people want to learn, and so we thought, hey, let's take some time and walk people through how this works. What are the vendors out there? What do they do? How do you evaluate them? All of that good stuff. Um, so we'll give them some key evaluation criteria. We'll talk a little bit through that. Um, Look at some different vendors. There's a lot of different tools out there, so we're going to look at some specific ones. And then, go through some of the things that Grant and Andrew are thinking about in terms of, boy, what should you watch out for? Because there are some snake oil salesmen out there. And then like how do you choose the right tools? We'll kind of walk you through that. And these guys are technology experts. They've seen a lot of technology come into the market, start fresh and grow. And that's what's happened with AI. It just seems to be happening a lot faster these days. So starting off, Succurri does a lot of different things and with technology. And now, of course, we're helping everybody with implementing AI in their business. So that's always good. Before we get going, you got to run a little bit of an ad. We do have a YouTube channel, more people subscribing to that. These webinars go out on that YouTube channel along with some other videos where I'm talking with either Grant or Andrew about things like security or AI stuff, of course, but also some other topics. Great place to learn about IT and the business side of things. So, go ahead and hit the YouTube channel. You can scan that QR code and please subscribe to that. All right, gentlemen, let's get going. The AI gold rush is here. We're right in the middle of it. So, you know, Grant, talk to me about the wave that's coming or the wave that we're on or however you want to call it.
Well, it's definitely not a fad, right? It is not going anywhere. Um, we are still, I would say, in the early infancy stage, um, if not even, not even scratching the surface of the infancy stage, right? In fact, this list of providers here, I don't even think scratched the surface of how many providers are there. And I would say that if you don't start seeing AI into basically every application that you use um, in the next 6 months, I'd be really surprised. Everybody's implementing it in some way, shape, or form. Um, some utilization is better than others. Some functionality is better than others, but ultimately, it is not going anywhere. So I guess buckle up for the ride. Um, I often go back to one of our first webinars where it was the weaponized AI. Um, and I had the Terminator pop up, and I had a conversation with my wife about this, and she's like, "This seems a lot like Terminator," and I'm like, "Yeah, we're going down a path that is uncharted, and we are turning over a lot of things over to AI, so it'll be interesting." So, and like I said, buckle up for the ride.
Yeah, yeah. Andrew, how are you seeing the gold rush? Yeah, I think you're right, Grant. Like this is just the surface of all the apps that are out there. They're just coming out of the woodwork. How do we discern, what's the right thing to do? Where should we start? What do we do? How do we, what's your take on that, Andrew?
Yeah, well, like every gold rush, if you go back and you look who actually made money, it's the people who supply the people who are digging the gold, right? It's not, so the monetary outcomes of what we're seeing today are yet to be figured out. So like if a business owner or a person is looking at this list and they're like, oh wow, I'm going to make some money on AI, you might. AI is very expensive. It takes a lot of resources to make it work. But today you can use AI to benefit your business or your organization or your personal life in a lot of really valuable ways. And so, for me, what I'm seeing is the evolution of AI, and we showed that in the previous video, we talked about it, but right now the phase that people are in is they're starting to use the tool in more than just an exploratory manner. And like, this is a month, right? Like we talked about this last month, and this is now a new mile marker. People are now using AI in ways that are very different, or that now are actually starting to provide value. So like I was at a retreat over a weekend, and I sat down. Well, I'm a technologist, right? And this was a bunch of physicians. And so people came up to me and they're like, hey, I heard you do AI. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess so. We're kind of here for other things, but I'd love to, chat with you. So by the end of that weekend, I'd sat down with 5 people and got them started on their own chat GPT models to build their own businesses and do their own things. And so it was very easy. So like now those people are coming back and they're saying, hey, I want to have better pictures than AI, than ChatGPT is designing, or I want to feed ChatGPT text from videos, but it won't watch the videos. So now we're in the zone where we're getting like our AI toolkit put together. And so, ChatGPT is one tool. It might be your hammer, and you have, Firefly. That might be your screwdriver. What I can tell you from this list is like, so for ChatGPT for me is about creativity, content generation. It does a great job of writing things. I have a customer who uses Claude to do financial real estate underwriting models because he believes that it's private cloud. Grant, you use Firefly to actually make Succurri's logos on our quoting forms. So like, there's a lot of things. So Grant, maybe you can talk about, your experience with Firefly and Copilot and some of these other, more specialized tools.
Yeah. So Firefly, actually, I mean, this goes back almost 2 years ago. And it was out of the pure laziness of I didn't want to deal with trying to design something for a quote template. And so I just started playing with, I had an Adobe subscription and I started playing with it. And through a couple different iterations, I came up with what our cover pages for the quoting. And I specified colors, I specified what I wanted to look like, and at a certain point, and finally got to a spot where I'm like, this looks pretty good. And so I said, send it. And so something that would have taken me probably days, potentially weeks of design took me maybe an hour. And keep in mind, like I said, this was my first run out of the gate. And so obviously I could probably do it faster now, but that was my intro, right? And then I started working with Copilot for Microsoft, plug for Microsoft. And so now I'll be perfectly honest. I don't know if I can write an email without it. If it wasn't, I was the kid that grew up with Word, and so if I didn't have Word, I probably wouldn't have a job because it does my spell checking. Now I'm dependent on Copilot to help me, you know, polish my emails because I come from a family that has no filter, and we're kind of brash when we our messaging across type. It tends to be a little rough, and so it puts a nice little polish on there. But like once again, Copilot, that's just the tip of the iceberg on that one. I use it for a lot for researching, presentations, being able to crank stuff out really really quickly that would have taken me days or weeks of research of trying to figure stuff out. Now, obviously, you can't just go into it without knowing what you have to understand what you're looking at, right? Because there are some inaccuracies from time to time, and that's something to be aware of when it comes to AI. But being able to give you the framework in a short amount of time and then going back and make your small modifications, and it's a game changer. So
Well, as you got, so I remember when I first started hearing about AI and I was like, oh, AI, it's this one, it's not a one size fits all app. It's not like this big app that's out there. It's this big AI brain. There's all these little apps that do all these different things. Andrew, you were talking about wrench and screwdriver. And all. Well, there's like 25 different wrenches or 30 different screwdrivers you can pick from. So, as you get into this, it's important to know, and this is what you guys are saying. Well, like, oh, I use Chat GPT for this, or I use Adobe Firefly for that, or I use Copilot for this other thing. How do you keep it all straight? What do you start? What do you start getting into? How, and I just kind of flash that next slide. So how do you help people decide which app to use for what?
Yeah, for me, this is where the gold rush comes in, where you're like rushing, right? Like we need to learn, like we need to start familiarizing ourselves with these AI tools. As technologists, we have a little more of a responsibility because we have to advise our customers and know how to leverage them. But I would say for anybody who's using these, it is time to start listening, to what your people in your conversation, like your friend groups or your different business groups are talking about with AI, what tools they're using, where they've been having success, their use cases. You know, take a screenshot of this list we have up and just go look up each one of these and see what they do. Like Grant mentioned, in 6 months, he expects to have pretty much every business application will have an embedded AI agent in it. I expect that like pretty much every single business conference you go to from now on will have an AI component. And like those that I've been to have actually done really good presentations like about marketing. And so there was a whole bunch of AI tools for that. When you're out in the world and you're seeing good AI, like last night I was on YouTube, and of course the shorts, they a wonderful waste of time. There was a short, and this channel basically does like what would people look like via AI's impression for every country in the world. And you look at it and it does a good job. Last night it was so good, I had to like look at it. I stopped the video many times because they were so close to
Yeah.
human, and their mannerisms and their movements were so accurate. I was like, oh damn, we have just crossed a threshold. So if you're in graphics design or something, that would be a good AI to go look at, because it was so good. It was on the threshold of my human eye having a hard time differentiating it. So this is where the rush is. We have to put a little bit of effort in, do some digging for the gold, right? We have to do a little bit of research. And that's really the gold that you're going to get, is you're going to find these tools that work for you. And then you're going to have them so you can do specific things in your business or your personal life that provides value.
So let's go through some of these. Now, this is a short list. And there's a lot of text on the screen, but as we look at these, the AI platform on the left, Grant, talk about some of these and how people use them, and maybe as you're starting to look at, because what we tried to do is come up with a core set of here are some tools that you should look at for different reasons.
Yeah, this set is definitely, I would say there's at least another 4 pages of AI models that just aren't here. So I'm, give me, top 10, whatever.
Yeah.
And I won't necessarily go through all of them, because we've covered Copilot, we've covered Chat GTP, Gemini. If anybody does a Google search, that's Gemini. That's what's popping up at the top there. I think it's important to point out really what they're used for, right? And so take a screenshot of this, go back and look at it on our YouTube channel, but really understand the differences of each model and where they stride. Like, so we don't have a Firefly up here on this one, but like Firefly for image generation, um, and I'll point out N8N and Roost are actually not AI models, but we did put it out there because you can embed AI into them, and their automation workflows ran off of AI. So just kind of a little note there.
And I guess, Grant, just to expand on that, because people might not understand. So like what Roost does, we use that in our industry, and it automatically creates user accounts, creates customers. It does things. It's a doing system. And so it's like the body, the hands, the arms. And now we've connected AI, which is we haven't connected it, but we can, is the body. So we actually have a webinar we're going to talk about in a few months about how Roost will transition from like the cerebral thinking to actually doing. But yeah, for those who don't know, like what we're talking about there is transforming AI's thoughts into actual actions.
Well,
Yeah.
Andrew, you had a Roost and those guys. I call
Plug
it
for Roost.
yeah, Roost, plug
Yeah.
for Roost. I call it a process engine because it's the thing, but you called it, what did you call it? Not machine learning, but what did you call that?
It's robotic process automation is
There
the,
you go.
the RPA. Yeah.
But if no matter what you call it, what it does is it allows you to grab information and make use of information in other systems and AI inside of a process, a business process. Um,
Yeah.
Go here and grab this information, put it over here, take that, take that record and go do this with it on this other system. And so it helps automate those steps. And when you're using AI like a GPT or something, that's really where the brain is. So,
Mhm.
but then you have different AIs like, uh, you know, Unipile as an example, that one on the bottom there, that helps that has an agent that goes and does messaging and scheduling on actual calendars. It will enrich data in databases, meaning it will update, go out and look for, oh, John Smith has a record in our database and we have this piece of information about John Smith. Oh, he changed jobs. Well, we can scan the internet, see that he changed jobs and update our database with it as an example. So there's a lot to unpack here. Um, as we get into kind of thinking about how to decide, how to evaluate, um, and what are those factors? Grant, maybe start talking to us about this first one.
Yeah. So how do you measure it, right? What are your KPIs? So if you're going to do an implementation of a system, what does it solve, right? And what is the goal and the purpose of it? Um, and then from there, how do you judge the success of that implementation? Um, so looking at like model accuracy, like the results that it produces, how accurate is it? So kind of going back to the comment of you want to go back and review the output of AI to make sure it's right. Don't just click send because it maybe wasn't giving the right message when it was typing my emails for me, right? So go back and look at that. And so how accurate is that? How fast does it work? Is another piece to look at. So is it time? Is it saving time, or is it taking a long time to bring back those results? Um, in your implementation, what's your time to value? So if you're going through the process of implementing this, how long does it take from the initial start model where you're doing some test case to actually generating value in your business? So how long does that take? And I think that's one of the more important things when it comes to your financial return, because obviously as you continue to invest time and resources and effort into this solution, it's basically a bottomless pit until it starts producing what you want it to. And so having some very defined goals and outcomes and timelines to get to those, I think are going to be really important, right? So like at what point do you know that something's not right or not on track? So paying attention to that, um, understanding what maybe your cost savings are when you implement this. Like, so what is the berry, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? So if I'm going to implement this tool and it costs, we'll say $50,000, right? Because things get expensive when you're implementing AI. Now, obviously, smaller projects are less, but for business automation, do I get a return on that investment in a relatively short amount of time? Or is it I've invested all this money and my savings is very incremental and very small in comparison, and so it takes me 7 years to recoup that cost. Obviously that may not be the best project that you want to work on. um, And then also adoption. Are your people going to use it? Right. So having a tool and building this cool, awesome thing doesn't give you any value if it doesn't get used. And Andrew and I can speak to that in our own business because we've had some really, really cool technologies that we're like, hey, if we do this, this is going to be the most awesome thing for our business. And then our team doesn't use it. And so you're like, that was a waste of time and money. And so that's a whole different piece is like a user adoption also comes with proper management and everything is going to come from the top down, right? So if you integrate it into your culture and this is how we do things going forward, you're obviously going to have much better user adoption. But if the product doesn't work and people just basically step away from it and you don't know about it and you're making the assumption that it's being used, but it's not, you're not getting any of that value back. So,
Yeah.
What's
And
interesting is, oh, go ahead, Andrew.
oh yeah, so just to add to it, Tony, we were talking yesterday while we were prepping for this. You showed us this great like document that you had outlined a procedure to like to document where you wanted to go with a certain initiative or a project you were doing.
Yeah.
And I think from a business standpoint, this can be very overwhelming, right? There's a lot of options out there. It's very technical. Business owners and business decision makers can get overwhelmed. What I would tell people is everyone can start this process, and it literally starts with a piece of paper and a pencil. This is the first thing we do in our process. This is the second thing, the third. So map out your process in its entirety, so you know every single little what I'll call like milestone in that process, and then you start to attach AI to those various milestones. So like for me, I'm working on creating a GPT model that needs a bunch of input of my conversations with people. So I found out that our telephone systems, meeting system actually will record my talk, my discussion with my employees, and it will output it to a transcript. So that's number one, which is capture raw text data of conversation. So, elevate phone system, online meeting. And then I can plug it into Chat GPT, which is going to feed that. So now Chat GPT, right? So if you have an outline of all the process, it really makes it a lot easier to start connecting AI to each one of those little pieces.
Well, what you're saying is, what is it that you're using it for? Are you using it to save time, to do something quicker? Are you using it to, go get data? Whatever that is, those are just two examples. You guys are saying, hey, start with something specific, keep it small, but map it out what you want it to do, because you may have to use two or three different tools to put it all together to make it work to get to where you want to go. Um, what's interesting to me in this next one, I think, is something that a lot of people aren't thinking about, and that is um, there's public and private AI. So, Grant, maybe you can talk about this one.
yeah. So this is where it gets kind of interesting. I think one of the major things that people aren't necessarily thinking about is, but it's happening pretty rapidly, is like data leakage. And so when I talk about data leakage, that's like your employees dropping information into public models that they really to get information back to help save time, create presentations, whatever it is. And in some cases, that's intellectual property. Sometimes that's protected information. Sometimes it's controlled, classified information. We see it happening all the time, right? And so when you're starting to look at evaluation criteria, understanding where that data is stored.
Oh,
Did you lose me? What?
I lost you there for a sec. That might have been on my end. Sorry about that.
Okay, sorry. So understanding where the data is stored, and understand how it's encrypted, um, understanding how the models are being trained, like what information it's taking in and keeping. Like, is it something that I'm just giving this information and it produces it, and then that session goes away and that information isn't taught, or is that information taught and it's kept there? And then who owns that information once the model's been taught, right? And I'll get a little deeper into that, into some of the red flags, um, but understanding like how it all kind of comes together, right? Like who's responsible for everything that it all entails. Um, Understanding the data security, like the information that's being passed. So like we're talking about connecting systems, right? And having different. So how is that information being passed through? Is that secure? Um, so yeah, I mean, those are, I think, focus on that right now of like what information is going into it, and how, where is it being stored, and who owns it.
Yeah. Yeah. It, putting personal information out there, or even personal financial, or some people are using it for that. Um, just be aware that there's public and private. I would think sounds like that's and if it's private, how's it secured?
Well,
Um,
and even in private, there is still a concern, right? And like I said, we'll talk about that at the red flag level, but there are concerns about, what model you're using, and who owns it.
yeah. Um, this next one is or topic, on integration. Andrew, you mentioned a few different parts of it, like, oh, it takes it from this system and that system. Uh, When you is all AI able to be integrated? How do you see that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, like ChatGPT has a lot of integration points. So when we talk about integrations, connecting one system to another, you create ecosystems, and ecosystems are like usually there's a central system like ChatGPT, and then there's little pieces around that connect to ChatGPT. So when you're looking at your AI, you want to make sure that it will connect to the right things. Like maybe that's your business system, right? Like if you're in manufacturing, that's your ERP system that controls your workflow and your purchasing. If you're in a sales business, it connects to your CRM system, which would like have your customer database and your mailing and list and things like that. If you're in IT, it's your ticketing system. So you want to make sure that they have connections. A lot, like Grant mentioned, a lot of companies are building connections in with AI. Now, does that mean that their connection goes to ChatGPT? It might not. One of the things that Succurri does is we build integrations between different systems as part of our software development arm called MSP interfaces. And so, like, we would use standard integration technologies to connect ChatGPT to other stuff that wasn't already built. So, yeah, if it doesn't come out of the box, there are companies that build those connections, but know ahead of time, right? Because you want to make sure that it is even possible to connect to the system you have.
Yeah. What data is available out of that system?
Yeah.
Uh, what seems to be happening is everybody can try to build like we're all experimenting in our own little worlds with our own little piece of AI, like, oh, I can get it to do that and this. Um, when you think about it as a business resource, to put it to use for a business, not just, oh, it helps me write emails. Probably 90% of the people out there, maybe 95, are using it to help them write something new. But as you start to integrate with a business, how do you know if it's scalable? How do you look at that? And what does it mean to be transparent when you
Yeah,
talk?
yeah. So on the scalability, you want to look for like infrastructure bottlenecks. And when I say that, so if you have somebody that is in your office that is really excited about AI and says, "Hey, I'm just going to put this model on my desktop and I'm going to start running my business." Like it always starts that way. Like, oh, I'm just building a test case. And then all of a sudden that test case goes production overnight and you're like, what the heck happened? And now your system just can't keep up with it. Right. So understand that AI requires a lot of horsepower. It requires a lot of processing, graphic processing. It requires a ton of storage and most likely a ton of bandwidth. And so when you're choosing a vendor or a solution, keep that in mind that you want something that is probably on a larger scale, cloud environment that is able to grow. So like once you actually hit the ground running, whether it started out as a pet project and then grew into something massive that your business relies on, or whatever it might be, but make sure that you're not changing the wheels on the bus when the bus is in motion.
Yeah. I think there's one product out there, one of a few different products, but one product out there is an app called Airtable. And Airtable takes data from a bunch of different places and puts it in one database in the cloud. And then you can pull from that data out of there. As an example, it's kind of what you're talking about is interesting to me. The transparency thing is also interesting to me. So like when you guys show me those screenshots of Roost, like look at how many systems we're leveraging inside of Roost. That to me is like, oh, it does this here, this other thing here, and moving this data over to this system. And it's very transparent. Is that what you mean by transparency, or is there something else?
Well, so transparency, there's a couple different things. So data management, so data will get messed up over time, right? Uh, if you have a model that's learning over time, sometimes things get poisoned accidentally. So AI poisoning is when like you're giving it information to get it to do something different than what it was designed to do, right? And so that will happen over time, accidentally, intentionally, whatever it might be. So you want to be able to make sure that you can manage that data that the AI is producing. So it goes back to if it's a black box and you can't see what's in there, that may be problematic because now your AI model is giving out the wrong information and there's no way to adjust it. So I think that's obviously a concern. Um, Also, transparency on how is it making decisions. If it's going through and the logic behind it is flawed, you may want to know about that and be able to make some adjustments. Like this goes back to some of the early times where so when I say early, we're still in infancy stage,
I know.
but like you were able to get AI to actually do some racial slurs. You can get it to do produce content that was really questionable. And so that was a problem with how the decision making process was working. And so obviously the big manufacturer, the AI models have been adjusted to fix that, but human beings will figure out ways to trick AI over time, so we've just started. So understanding how having some transparency to how it's working and being able to fix those problems is going to be really, really important in the model.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all of these things are important as you're thinking about, well, what AI solutions do we want to, get into or have somebody get into for us? A lot of people out there saying, "Oh, we can do this and we can do that for you." This last one really is I think critical, depending on, how technical you are. But just having somebody develop something but not be able to provide a way to support what they do for you is or they build it for you and then they just leave, that's not really important.
Well,
Uh,
I'm glad you pointed that one out because that's I think as a business owner, that's probably one of the major concerns, right? Is that most likely you're going to have somebody in your office that is potentially driving this force of saying, "Hey, we've got to do this," and you're like, "Cool, go for it." They have the interest, they have the excitement, and so they create this tool, right? That employee ultimately either leaves with that tool when they leave, or you have a tool that now you can no longer support. And so we deal with that a lot, not necessarily on the AI side, but with software, especially on the MSP interfaces side, where we're having to go back in and figure out what this employee's done and be able to fix it, fix whatever problems are being done and be able to support it for the business owner long term. So training and support from the vendor level is going to be really important because they're the ones that are providing you these tools. And so, yes, you have a champion in house that's helping you through this. But if that champion walks out the door, you still need somebody to be able to help you with this tool, especially when it's business critical.
yeah, yeah. Well, lots of things to think about as you're looking at AI and really implementing it in your business. You talked a little bit about red flags. Why don't you go into some of this?
I feel like I'm taking over the conversation, but this one is the one that kind of gets me. I think vendor lock-in is kind of my concern, um, because so you have like a
What does that
lot of
mean?
these.
All right, before you go, what does that
Yeah.
mean?
So vendor lock-in is when you start using a technology, and so your business processes, your data sits with a vendor, and it is difficult to get that process, that model, or that data out of that vendor. And so in vendor lockout comes in a couple different ways. So one could be maybe there's not a good API access or any API access at all. So yes, you have this great AI model. It does exactly what you want it to, but there's no way to move it. So you're spending all this time and money and investment into a tool that ultimately the vendor owns and you can't take it. So if you want to move to a different vendor, you can't because there's no export methods, whether it be via API or something along those times. And there's actually been some pretty big cases where vendors have actually failed. So Builder AI collapsed 1.3 billion dollar AI software building company, backed by Microsoft and other companies, collapsed overnight. And so all these companies that had spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars with them to build these programs, overnight it stopped working. And I can't judge, what level of dependency their business had on it, but maybe some of them went out of business because of that. So now
Yeah.
you've got a vendor that is basically holding all the keys to your kingdom, and if they close the doors, that's it. So sorry, I'm going on a rant, but it's
No,
really important to understand, like, it's, if a vendor's got you locked in, they kind of own you, right? And so understanding how to negotiate from a contractual perspective, but also how to navigate so you're not necessarily held into that when you're choosing your vendor.
yeah. Well, a lot of people out there saying this AI can do that and this AI, and I just wonder how many of us are just like, well, let's wait and see, because there's so many names out there as you go through this. Um, it's like people just start building stuff, and the next thing you know, it's like all put together, and you go, oh, well, it's doing these eight things, but it doesn't do this 10th and ninth, 10th and 11th thing real well in our process. Does that mean we built all this AI automation for nothing because it doesn't really do what we want it to do, but it does a few things really well? But it's like that's what I'm wondering is there going to be a situation where you go, oh, these 10 AI apps are gone because they couldn't monetize their uh
Oh, absolutely. Especially I mean, it's like the dot-com era, right? You're going to have all these companies popping up left and right. And ultimately, the purpose of a company is to make money, right? So having a great idea doesn't translate necessarily to dollars in the bank. And so you are going to have some consolidation. You are going to have some level of bankruptcy when the fad starts to wear off, or everybody in the world is doing AI. What's your differentiation between you and your competitor? Yeah, you're going to see people close the doors, and that's so. When you're going through the process, you have to build in your exit strategy with that vendor. And I think it's probably more in the slides here, but like everything from escrow, right? So you get into an escrow agreement with your code, your model, your data, building that into your contracts. But yeah, definitely have an exit strategy before you pick a vendor.
in that scenario, you're basically saying, okay, vendor, um, if you go out of business, we there's a way for us to get our data back.
Correct.
Yeah, in a process. Um, Here's one that I'm running into all the time. Different pricing models. And if some of them are, oh, pay us each month and you get access to the tech. Um, some of them are, oh, if you do this many processes or steps, you know, um, we charge per step. Um, and then you also have a situation where to do one full process, there might be five or six, maybe even seven apps, depending on how big this process is. Um, when you go through that, how, how do you look at total cost of solution from in the IT space? How do you guys look at this?
Andrew, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would say we're at the point right now where I'm not seeing total solutions being delivered yet. I mean, maybe for some like very specific companies, but for the businesses that we deal with, which are that medium size organization, I'm just not seeing full blown AI driven solutions yet, which is which makes it hard, right? Because like you said, what is the cost of it? What I would say is I personally, and I would say the majority of the customers I talk to are waiting on the sidelines. People are waiting to see how the chips fall and what vendors survive and which ones don't. My 25 years of experience say that Microsoft will probably come out near the top because it
Yeah.
buys its way to the top. Google will probably come out to the top. Chat GPT was the forerunner, so it'll probably be near the top. And then you'll have a lot of smaller companies that do specific AI, and then those will consolidate significantly, right? Like you'll have, instead of 100 AI companies that do artwork generation, you'll probably have like five that are good. And then that's where everyone will pool their business. So, from what I would say right now, like the thing to take away from this is it's not about building a full blown solution today. It's about it's about getting incremental value from little pieces of that solution. So, if your goal is to automate your production line, and right now AI does a really good job of scanning barcodes, and that saves you time and money, like put that in. Like start scanning the barcode, start having AI tell you about it, get incremental value. Maybe the next thing down the line on the production line is the cutter or something, and now AI can cut based upon what you need to be doing. So incremental value, really start small, be cautious, but be open to the fact like this is here to stay. It is going to change the way we do business. Like I have a kid in college and I have a kid in high school, and my kid in college is already being told by professors like, oh yeah, you should use AI to summarize the notes that you recorded today from this lecture and have it give you some prompts on how you're going to write this paper. And like that's professors telling students that. They're like, so what I see happening is AI is going to be like a calculator. It's going to be like a forklift. It'll be heavy lifting. We still have to think, but it's a tool we have to know. So it's about learning how to use those little tools.
Yeah, be careful which ones you get into. I like the advice of, hey, do something, small, incrementally improve what you
Yeah.
have and learn that way. Um,
Yeah. The
so
reason I say that, just to kind of go into, is
yeah,
big solutions, AI or any software you develop or any process you develop are expensive. Like Grant said, they're a black hole till they produce value. In my experience, 95% of those solutions will bleed you dry before you finish them. And so the 5% who make it, if they scrape across the finish line, they start to get value. But if you do it incrementally and you're getting value at every single stage of the way, you won't bleed yourself dry. So like, and this is a lesson hard learned by me over my years of doing hey, I'm going to make the massive solution and I just don't have the funds or the time or the resources. But now I do incremental changes and then incremental changes and then incremental changes. And then I get there. It takes more time. But by the time I arrive, there's very few people at the end of that finish line.
so in other words, if you're starting at a smaller place with something that isn't a full solution and you're doing it incrementally, if you make mistakes in one little small piece, they don't cost you the whole thing.
Correct. Yeah. And also, like, if you're getting value from each one of those steps, that's like nourishing your financial situation or your staffing situation. Maybe people get more time back. Maybe you're producing more product. So you have more revenue to go do the next thing. And then you get incremental value, produce more money, more time, but maybe it's twice as much money and more and time as the last one. You go to the next thing. Maybe it's 3 times the amount of money and time. So, right, you can see it can exponentially grow every time you add something that AI can automate, can it make more efficient, can extend your capabilities.
So when early on Grant was like, figure out what you want it to do. Um, how do you define business goals and objectives with AI if you don't know how it works? What does that mean? I mean, there's some examples on the screen, yeah, but what does that mean? How do you start picking and choosing and thinking about, well, what should we do?
Yeah, I'll let Grant do some of the examples, but I will tell you in general, my experience is specifically business owners in the United States, we are very reactive. We learned how to do something. Someone wanted to pay us money, and then all of a sudden we got too busy, and now we were reacting to the business that's coming in. I find most people don't have business goals. They'll be like, well, I don't want to be underwater. I want to make more money. You're like, okay, well, the art of actually defining business goals is not well trained or taught across the industry. And like, that's the problem, right? Like I can tell people what AI tools to use. I can tell them how to write the integrations. I can map out the whole process. But if they don't know where they're going, I can't tell them how to get there. So I would say, ask AI for, business goal development. And then what are some techniques that you can teach me about business goal development? And ultimately every business goal development structure is going to be like, have a big goal, break it into smaller pieces, break those pieces into smaller pieces, and then break it into like daily activities. Stick with your daily activities, and at some time in the future, you're going to get to where your goal needs to be. It's going to be taken care of.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that I pull out of this too is there are certain types of goals like, oh, we need to hit this much in revenue. Oh, well, how many sales does that take? Oh, well, how many
Yeah.
people do we need to talk to get to that many sales? I'm more familiar with that. Maybe on the finance side, or the operations side, it's, oh, we need to reduce our COGS, from revenue down to 40% of revenue. You know, there's a financial goal of some kind. But when we talk about AI, it seems to be right now that some of the people are just like, it's like throwing spaghetti on the wall, like, oh, this is cool. Let's do this. But we sat there and joked. You're like, no, have AI tell you how to do something. It will
Yeah.
actually do that if you have a question. Oh, if we wanted to do this, dot, 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 dot. If we wanted to answer inbound phone calls with AI, could we do that? It will tell you, it will start to give you a plan and how you do this and how you put it together. It's kind of interesting that way. But there's all those decision criteria, evaluation criteria you have to kind of think about as you do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so know what to do, be incremental, start small, make sure you know what you want to do. And Andrew, you've said this a couple of times, map it out. Tell me what that means.
Yeah, I mean, that's just going back to AI can only accomplish what we tell it to accomplish. And if it's a process that's unique to your business or your personal life or however you're going to use AI, like you may be an expert at it, right? Let's say you're an expert at baking cookies and there's all these little techniques that you use to make these magic cookies. And AI doesn't know those techniques, but if you map it out for AI, it will now understand that recipe. And so the same thing would be for a business. Like if your goal is to reduce your cost of goods sold, like you just said, well, map it out. Like how would you go about doing that? And then teach AI that by feeding it that process. And then you can have AI start to produce results based upon the process. And the thing that's good about that is if you've mapped everything out with a process, like, line by line, this is what I want it to do. you know how at the end of the process what your results should be. Like Grant talked about this very first thing in this slideshow or the presentation is know what your key performance indicators are, know what your outputs are supposed to look like. So when AI starts to produce outputs, you can say, oh, that's right. Like I know that I was looking for the number 200 and I got the number 200 versus you're like, I think I'm in like the range of 200 to 225 and it spits out like 224. Well, is that the right number, right? You have a big range of what might be okay. With AI, though, the more specific you are, the more valuable your outcomes are going to be.
Anything to add to that, Grant?
No, I think ultimately, if anything that we carry through a lot of our webinars, everything from security to compliance to AI is start small, right? Because if you start small, one, it's not, typically there's not a huge financial obligation that goes along to it. There's not a heavy resource utilization. And it gives you the opportunity to educate yourself and correct or create a path of where you want to go along the way. Sometimes you just have to jump in with both feet and just, for lack of a better term, start swimming, right? Like,
Yeah.
and once you get a little further down the path, then you're like, oh, it can do this really well. I can see this being used in this part of my business. And so you just have to start somewhere. And like I said, it's the message that we carry in a lot of our videos is that if you don't start anywhere, you'll never start.
Yeah.
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 One thing to add to that, I mean, we try and make these videos as agnostic as possible, right? We want to be very neutral. It's not about Succurri or our services, but we actually do these services. So, there are people who want, I want to write a check solution, right? Like, tell me the number, I'll sign the check, and then you guys make it happen. So, starting small is like how you do this. But if you just want it to be done, we do that for you. So like we would be happy to chat with anybody about how to implement AI in your organization, help you design that like overarching strategy of, not just piece by piece, but the whole thing. There are organizations out there and Succurri is one of those.
Well, I want to touch on that a little bit because one of the things that I love working with you guys is the discipline of implementing technology, implementing supporting technology to get the most out of it for your business. That is a discipline. That is a thing, you guys say, "Oh, we're technologists." I think it's more than that. I think it's when you're implementing this new technology for your business, make sure you're thinking through all the different elements of this technology. So Curry spent time learning how this stuff works. We can help your business. It's like anything else in the world these days. You could do it yourself. But is that what you're geared to do? Is that what you're supposed to be doing? Is that the best use of your time and money in your business? And so maybe you have executives out there who are thinking like, oh, can we use AI to automate this, or can we use AI to get us that information? I think if you're having those types of questions and you're not out there asking AI itself those types of things, you guys are the perfect guys to talk to. So I learned a ton just by having conversations like this all the time.
Yeah, we are professional roadblock removers.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And that's technology, that's the AI, that's security. And nowadays it all intermingles, right? And so as you go through those steps in that process, you're going to run up against issues. It's not doing this, I can't do this. And we get it over the hump and get it to the next level and keep the process moving.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Hey, Andrew, now's the time to open it up to Q&A, to questions. I don't know if we have any sitting out there or what's going on, but I thought I'd give us a little space to answer any questions if anybody had any at this point.
Yeah, it looks like we have Nick, whose question was, how do I get started with AI for my business? I don't have any specific goals in mind. So for Nick, for your question, how I would say, like for me, this is how I got started. And we talked a little bit about this in the previous webinar is to get like where you should be right now as a business owner is you should be experimenting with Chat GPT or one of the other models, and you should be asking it like a simple questions like, how is your day today, Chat GPT? And it's going to ask you back and have a conversation with it. You're going to rapidly figure out that it can do a lot of things. What I would say, I would suggest you move to very quickly is to actually start building your own models. And so like Chat GPT, you can create your own GPT models. I'm creating one of like basically to replace me. I want to be irrelevant in my business. And so I'm feeding it conversations where I show my staff algorithms and processes, procedures, give them institutional knowledge, and I'm feeding those conversations into Chat GPT so that they can then ask Chat GPT, and Chat GPT will likely respond back in the way that I would be consistent with what I would respond back in, because it's great at recognizing patterns. I'm very pattern driven. So, that's my suggestion is get into Chat GPT, pay for a like simple pro account, and then figure out how to build your own model and fill it with the information that makes you special and your knowledge and like your zone of genius. And you're going to find that it's going to start spitting back results very quickly. And I think we're actually going to do like probably a live, I think one of our webinars is a live GPT creation session. I can't remember from the calendar we had, Tony, but that would be a good one to join at some point.
Yeah, there's so many different ways we could go with that. We definitely have that on the roadmap here coming up. So we'll keep putting out this good information. Thanks, Andrew, for answering that. Any other questions? Did anybody?
No, that was it.
That was it. Okay, good. Well, appreciate your guys' time. I know you guys want to give away a set of AirPods, so anybody who's registered to this webinar will be entered into that. And Grant, you've got a few different gifts to give away coming up. We've got to put out on our YouTube channel. That'll be kind of exciting. You've got like a name generator, so you throw all the
Well,
names in, or how does that
so
work?
so to be fair, on a few of them, I don't know if we can post those on YouTube for rules that we will not mention in a
Uh,
live webinar. But yeah, the winners or the people that are in entered to win, I do send a video of the wheel of names, and it spins around. I play Vanna White, and it picks the winner. So so I do have a couple of those to do. So yeah, so be on the lookout from an email from me here in the not too distant future. Whether you win or not, you get the video so you can see it in real time. So I guess not real time, but in video. So
Awesome. All right. Well, again, you know, join our YouTube channel. If you're watching this out on YouTube and you want to subscribe to this and hit that little bell because I know I'm on my phone. There's a few things that come up every time those YouTube channels post a new video. It's kind of interesting the YouTube um, ecosystem because it used to be the stuff you wanted to watch. You'd go sit in front of your TV and you'd hit, well, back in my day, you'd have like, the dial and you'd have to walk to the TV and go, oh, channel 4. You got like 5 channels or whatever. And then we went to cable where you could surf like crazy, you know? And then now we're at streaming where it's like on YouTube, if I'm interested in a topic, I can just let it, have it let me know when there's a new episode. So I don't have to worry about, oh, new episode. Okay. I know these guys are going to be interesting because they're going to talk about AI and security, and I need to know that stuff about or know about that stuff for my business. So make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell and you'll get notified. So thank you for your
Awesome.
time, guys.
don't forget to hit that like button too.
Yeah, yeah. Likes help.
And
We're not,
subscribe.
we're not
And
feeding, we're not
subscribe.
feed, we're not feeding ourselves with the like button, but it helps,
Yeah.
word
Yeah.
out. All right. We'll talk to you guys later. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.